Okay, this one I've prepared nothing. I usually have some notes, but no notes this time. Been a hell of a few weeks. Here I am for our Sunday monologue. Where do I start this week? Well, first thing is note to self. Never say to yourself that something is going to be easy. I had repeatedly told myself that the Power Nerd record was, an introduction to this 3 record series that I've been working on between Power Nerd, The Moth, and Axolotl. Maybe in part to do with the fact that I had told myself it was going to be easy. It ended up being exceptionally different than I expected. I talked to some people that their connection to music is very much like the content doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? It's like they write music because it's just, it's songs and it feels cool to write it, and I think I had gone into this record with that sense, thinking I'll just make a statement that is based on writing some simple rock and roll songs, and it gets a record out this year and whatever. But it really underlines the idea, as I said before in some of these other updates, that your subconscious has a much tighter grasp on your creative inclinations than I think we give it credit for. And as a result, Power Nerd became this interesting experience of writing reasonably simple songs that adhered themselves to a litany of very difficult life experiences. And had I written those same songs in a period of my life where things were a bit smoother, I guess it would have just been an easy record. But as it stands, it's turned out to be very interesting, I think. I mean, again, the intent of it is still for it to be like the intro to this series, but it was just so emotionally charged. And one of the biggest things that I found difficult with this record was some of the verses. I'm so used to multi-tracking my voice over and over and over again with 4 different layers of harmonies and lots of effects and all sorts of things. And whenever I tried to do that with this record, which is the way that I guess it would sound the most in line with things that I've done in the past, it just sounded like I was hiding in a way. And the only voice that I found that I had that was appropriate seemed oddly, in the verses at least, like meek. But it was, I guess that's just what was meant to happen. And however many weeks ago, 30 weeks ago, when I started this update process, I remember mentioning in passing that the records tend to reveal themselves to us in the final week. So to sort of give an idea of what has been going on, I mixed, recorded, and got to the point about a week and a half ago where I recognized that my fatigue was not making the record come together in the ways that it deserved. It's one thing to sort of create deadlines for ourselves in order to sort of thrust through any habitual procrastination. But at the end, I'd be foolish to rush something when it was clearly not done. So I put it aside, and then for the first time in 30 some odd years, Steve Vai and myself got together for a week. And it was wonderful. We're not kids anymore. We're friends. We have a lot in common. We had to work through a bunch of things from our past, but we knew that was going to happen. And it wasn't dramatic. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes you can be in scenarios with people whom you've had a past with, and there's a certain element of toxicity to it that makes it such that whatever progress you make is juxtaposed by awfulness, and that's not the case. It was really nice to make friends with each other, watch cooking shows and play guitar, you know what I mean? And work on the Moth. I've always known Steve as a guitar player, and I guess there's a certain part of me that feels like the tonalities that he chooses is so intrinsically tied to our past and our work together when we were both kids that whenever I hear the guitar, it reminds me of a certain thing when he plays it. But what I wasn't prepared for was hearing his depth of orchestral composition. And there was a certain moment where I was like, oh, I see you now. Yeah, you're a genius. I had no idea. I mean, I knew, but not in that realm. In the realm that he exists in, there's nobody that is as accomplished as that. It was really humbling, and I think that between the two of us, once we made progress in our relationship and we were able to jam for the first time on the Moth. Because where we're at with the Moth now is I'm still working on the concept, I'm still working on the story, because in order to illustrate that story properly, we need to make sure that the story is really watertight. So I've got a number of people, and I've been assembling a team for the past several years, people who are able to communicate as adults and recognize when an idea that they're trying to get across is rooted in just trying to get their idea in there versus whether or not this is the best thing for this piece of music. And by vetting people to the point where now I have a skeleton crew of people that can help me articulate this, the whole goal is to have people who are superior to me in the ways in which they function, like the orchestrator, the story writer, the animator, composer, all the players, everybody that's involved with it. I've been looking for people who can take it to another level, that can make it more than I can do on my own. I've always cited this story that I'll tell you here, and continue to, because it really plays into my work with the Moth, I think. That's the story of the nail soup. If I haven't mentioned it, I'd be surprised, but for those who have not heard me mention it, is a story I heard when I was a kid about a guy who's starving, and he goes into the middle of town and all he has is a nail and a cauldron. And so he sets it up in the middle of town and he fills it with water, starts a fire, and starts to boil the water and drops the nail into it. And then the townspeople come around and they say, what are you making? And he says, well, I'm making nail soup. And the question is, well, what's in it? It's like, it's just nail and water. And they say, well, you can't just have that. Here, I got some tomatoes. We'll put tomatoes in there. Somebody else comes along and says, what are you making? Making nail soup. What's in it? Nails and tomatoes. We can't just have that. Here, I'm a butcher. I've got some meat. I can put it in there. The story goes on, and at the end, they've got this beautiful thing. And the punchline is the people saying, wow, I'm so shocked. I had no idea that you could make such a delicious thing out of a nail. And in a sense, that's kind of like the Moth. I have the story. I've got the trajectory of the concept. And I know where I want it to be. But in order for me to actualize it in the way that I think warrants the depth of the story, it requires people who are superior to me in all these places. Otherwise, it's a high school play. And I think that these 3 records that I'm working on right now are very much like, part of me feels like, oh, it's like like a swan song in a way, but I doubt it. I think it's very potentially a swan song for this particular part of my life, but I can't imagine that I will not continue. It seems like really an affront to whatever skill set you have to deny it from being what it can be and all it can be. That being said, I've learned a lot about fatigue over the course of this last couple of months with the power nerd thing. What I recognized over the last 2 days, which was surprising, and I guess it's happened enough times before that in hindsight I see it over and over and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that was. So Power Nerd, I wrote it in such a short period of time. The recording was so frantic, the energy behind it was so frantic, the emotions behind it were so heavy. It's like the time in which it happened was just so, frenetic. And then all the family things, and then Steve, which was really understandably like intense for both of us. And then he leaves, and now I'm starting working on the actual mix for Power Nerd. And I put up the tracks today, and I was listening to it, and I was very thankful to recognize that I can hear it now again, and the things that I need to do to make it speak are not nearly as extensive as I thought in that last push to get it out the door a couple of weeks back. So now I can sort of methodically go through it and take a bit more time and make it right and hear it, and it's great. But between all those things sort of suddenly coming to an end, like that pressure and the anticipation of writing together, and the speed in which the Power Nerd thing had to come together, and then the money and all the things that were you have these moments where you're like, oh, it's going to go south, and then in the nick of time you're able to pull it back from the edge, and all these things. And then when it stops, what I failed to recognize is I think that your body gets used to that adrenaline. You're constantly in the red, you're constantly running, you're constantly stressed, and the anxiety, and you have to be up at 7 and you go to bed at midnight, and it's like bang, 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 and in the midst of it you're thinking, God, I just want this to calm down so I can focus. And then it does calm down, and then what I found was just the sudden lack of adrenaline makes me start looking for problems elsewhere. I start thinking, anytime something comes up, I'm viewing it like this is like a problem I need to fix, and it's not. It's just you're looking for things at that point, and I guess I just had failed to recognize in the past that level of intensity that you sustain, that in the midst of it you don't recognize how unhealthy it is either. When it stops, you'd be like, oh, thank God, now I can just watch TV and kick back and play some guitar, but you just crash. So the only way that I found to stave off that kind of crash and that sort of depressive thing that happens is exercise. Like I like the yin yoga just because it's sedentary, and then just, light exercise, just treadmill, some light uh, weights of just nothing that's like weight training, but more just to get your blood pumping. And it's a magic balm, I swear. BALM. Immediately I was like, right, where was I? It's funny when you are feeling bouts of depression, even if it's not clinical depression, even if it's momentary. It seems like the hardest thing to do is just to get some exercise. It seems like taking that step is the hardest thing. But once I do, I'm so aware of how important it is to maintain this trajectory and these ideas that I have. It's up to us. It's not a scenario where it's elective. Well, I mean it is, but it's elective if you choose to continue to feel a way that there's a solution for. And so begrudgingly I'm like, all right, let's get up there and do it. And then after it's done, I'm shocked. I'm like, oh yeah, drink some water and get the blood flowing. And then these problems are more in the realm of reality as opposed to delusion. At the same time, that's funny. I've been really fortunate, and by my own hand, I have put myself in a position where I can just write and record this year. And that was a conscious thing. I tried to do a bunch, and I came off of social media. Just that, it's not even the toxicity of it. It's the omnipresence of it. It's that sort of sense of always checking your phone and always seeing if somebody's responded to your Twitter post or X post or whatever it is now. And so I came off it because I found it was monopolizing a lot of my time and my energy. But then there's a certain amount of anxiety that comes from not engaging with people in the same way. But it'll come. I just needed this time. And in the meantime, without touring, we've tried to do projects that will keep the boat afloat. And I know that a lot of my social media feed now is full of management and the companies that I work with that are advertising things that we're putting out. But I would say that every one of these projects that we've put out, like whether or not it's the book or the gear or whatever, I've spent a ton of time on all of them, on the reissues and all of this. And I appreciate so much people. Thank you for helping if you do, because it's a combination of, in order to get my head back into this in a way that really benefits the next step, I needed to step back from it. But by not touring, I need to generate some income to keep these projects moving forward and to pay everybody. And so thank you. And thanks to the companies as well. I saw a bunch of friends, they were on tour. Everybody's on tour and sending pictures and festivals, and it's like whenever I see it, I remember when I was younger, the idea of going on tour or playing festivals or whatever was this, I just couldn't wait to do it. But this year, every time I see it, it's like anxiety. I'm like, man. And it's not because I don't like playing shows. It's just right now, it's like everything's been in the red for so long. And you know what it's like if you're in a band and you have a show in your hometown. Maybe it's 2 Fridays from now, and you've been hanging up posters and everybody's been rehearsing it, and you've got some cool little gag for the show, like a show. That level of excitement that you feel. Where if it's every now and then, it's that excitement is like, it's a tangible thing that is like kind of enjoyable, I guess. It's like nerve-wracking, but it's exciting. But when you're in the red, the problem with touring is it never goes away. Like maybe to some people it does, but for me, every night is that level of anxiety and intensity and excitement. And when I'm in it, when I'm on point and I'm digging into the touring, then that is what feeds us, right? But right now, just the idea of doing that, I'm like, whoa, not yet. So I got offered a bunch of tours for things after Power Nerd, things after Moth, things after Axolotl. And I just said to everybody, I was like, I can't make that call yet. I need to get this record done and then take my foot off the gas while I start to pick away at these other things. It's been a trip, man. So I guess I'll summarize this particular update by saying, if I was to identify what I feel I've learned through the Power Nerd record, the last week's synopsis, the last week of a record, like I'd mentioned before, what have we learned? What have I learned? Do I even know yet? I think what I've learned is that for much of my life I have suppressed emotions. For some practical reasons, let alone the stereotypical man thing. For some practical reasons, I suppressed them. I needed to deal with things, and maybe those overt displays of emotions just really get in the way, like if you're having to confront or you're having to negotiate, or if you're having to get through trauma or whatever. And so I think that I anytime things came up that were emotional, I would very quickly kind of push it down or analyze it. I think that was kind of my trip, and probably still is my trip. I analyze it, and then it removes the power. It's like if you can intellectualize it, then you don't have to necessarily participate in it. But what I learned is it's very healthy to allow yourself, at least to allow myself, to feel those things. It's not easy, but I think it's a sign of growth. I think it's a sign of actually participating in some things that were either too hard or too frightening to face. And it comes out, and when you're making music, when you're making art, what, at least in my experience, circumnavigates any desire to hide is the desire to be present, the desire to be in your truth. And if that means that you've got to go through these things, then you're just postponing the inevitable unless you allow it to come out. It made me realize how I've changed. I think this record has really underlined the ways in which the past 5 years have altered my most all of our lives in many ways. And again, like denying the ways in which it had changed, which I probably had done, doesn't serve a very practical purpose, because again, it's going to come out eventually. It has to. If your work is rooted in trying to put the progress into some sort of artistic presentation, then it's just going to come out eventually. So you might as well just get through it. The insecurity that I felt about it, the insecurity about, and it kept morphing too, the insecurity about at first thinking, oh, it's going to be something like Punky Brewster. It's just going to be a simple thing, and I'll just get it out, and it'll be fun, and then I can dig into the other stuff. But then the consequent, nope, that's not going to happen, man. The consequent emotional tsunami that ended up being the hand in hand with the process. It's almost humorous to have that level of intensity attached to something that is that kind of lighthearted in a way. And I'm here for it, man. I really am. In those moments where it seemed like it was insurmountable, either the work or the insecurity or the second guessing or the technical sides of it or the extracurricular bullshit that was hand in hand with it, whatever it was, the rawness of the experience opened my eyes to a lot of things that I had not been aware of prior. Not even within myself, but also just like the rawness made it such that I remember looking at my parents, who I'm still so fortunate to have, and being like, oh, I see you. I'm so glad you're still here. For how long? I mean, who knows, right, at this age? And you see your family, and then you see your friends, and then you see, I've got friends who are really struggling with physical ailments. And it made me very grateful that I'm still able to do the things that I do. And I'm surrounded by the people that I am, and the people that are in my orbit. If there's anything that makes me feel that the decisions that I've made over the past decade or so have been predominantly the right ones, it's just the quality of the people in my life, And it doesn't matter what the music is for each record. It doesn't matter. It's just a different costume for the same thing. It's the same, you're the same entity. It's just the circumstances are different now. So when all is said and done, prior to getting into The Moth and Axolotl, Power Nerd was a lesson in violence. And I just, it's like so grateful for it. It's crazy. What's it like? I mean, it's a dev record, It's got big choruses and got some heavy riffs. It's got me screaming like my balls are stuck in a taffy puller every now and then. And then it's quiet every now and then. It's full on emotionally for me. I don't know if that'll translate. I really don't. Because I don't know if it's the music that's that way or if it's just the circumstances. But for whatever it is, it's a snapshot of time that I didn't expect. I didn't expect it, and I didn't anticipate any of it. And I think it's the humorous part of it now is just how flippant I was about it in the beginning. Like, oh yeah, this could be, well, then we can get on The Moth, yeah. And then halfway through it, I'm like, fuck. I realize I don't like staying up late. It's like weird. For years it was like, that was the thing, I'd stay up till like 3 a.m. and then I'd wake up at noon. But I don't like that. I like going to bed at like 9:30 and getting up at like 5. I like the mornings. I'm on my own in the morning. And it's quiet and I'm fresh and My ears are not squealing as much as they normally do. And I like the prospect of a new day. You know, there's something about that I find really inspiring. It plays into the work when you're the freshness of it all, right? Of the morning. But for this, I've had to do nights. And my body doesn't like sleeping particularly much at the best of times. Let alone when you have stayed up late and then when you wake up, your internal clock is like thinking, dude, it's 7 a.m., you gotta be up. And you wake up at 9 and you're like, man, I slept in. Forgetting that you went to bed at 4. And as we get older, the royal we. I mean, it's funny. For those of you who are maybe a little younger that watch this, I know for myself when I used to watch people that got a little older, got into their 50s or whatever, all the platitudes and all the things that they would say about it just seemed to be so rehearsed. It seemed so like, yeah. But man, there's a couple of them I was like, wow, it really happens. It really happens. And perhaps there's a part of that recognition of, oh, this is something that actually does happen, that makes me think, well, what else am I missing? What else do they tell me? You know, you look at people in their 80s and they're like, well, you can't just work. I hope that I have the presence of mind to be able to take these lessons to heart and really begin to modify these patterns. The work will benefit from it. Again, the Power Nerd thing was meant just to be like a fun little sort of Punky Brewster side thing before I get the main courses out. And it's not quite a record yet. I've got another 10 days, so now the process is making it a record. So I've got all the songs, so I'm mixing it, doing rough mastering, and then putting it in order, and then seeing what it's missing, and seeing which aspects of it aren't flowing, and which ones are jarring, and which ones seem to lull in energy, and whether or not this song should come after this one, and what the impact of having this song directly after this one would do. And I guess the hope and the goal is that when I have finally vetted all these ideas, as is every record, and then you hear it, my hope is that some of the things that I struggled with, that I was able to identify through the lyrics and identify through the music, maybe a handful of you will listen and be like, oh yeah, me too. Me too, man. I don't know if I'll be doing this style anymore. You've heard it from me before. But man, did it ever rock me. Yeah, it was awesome. It is awesome. It's fucking awesome. It's crazy. Oh, I'm here for it. I love it. Man, the emotions, just being a human is such a fucking trip, man, and it's so short. But man, you get to do all this crazy stuff while you're here. This is why I think one of the pitfalls is thinking that you need to be like you have to remove yourself from everything. You know? You have to just deny, because that's like what's the term? Not aesthetic. You know the one where the people, they go meditate in a cave somewhere. But it's like, it's so short, this life thing, man, and it's like in all these experiences and all these ups and downs, and the fact that I have whatever skills that I do, it's like, man, just get this going. Get yourself centered, get rested, and then hit it. Because all these wonderful things, man, it just seems like it's such a waste to not do it. And maybe this year is just a testament to having to learn, among other things, that it's so silly, man. I don't even think it's, I'd like to be critical of it as I typically am and just say, oh, it's just such self-aggrandizing bullshit. But it's just, man, it's just more than me. It's more than I. And I don't understand it at all, so all I'm doing is just doing my best. And I think if anybody came to me for advice, I would say, none of us understand anything, so just do your best. And know when you're bested. I love the ambient stuff, man. Maybe one day. Maybe that'll be my trip. Maybe on a beach somewhere. And that's just what I do, is just ambient music. But in the meantime, I get this fucking record done. Thanks for everything, guys. Thanks for the patience. To everybody in my life who's helped me out right now. Cheers. I'm gonna go get this next mix started. I'm working on a song called Glacier. Working title tonight. It's heavy. It's not brutal, but it's heavy. Alright, I'm done. See you guys next week. I might shave too. Cheers.